Hello BookTube. For this tag Thursday, I'm going to be doing the 20 Bookish Questions tag. This tag was created by Book Time with Elvis, and I was tagged by Steve Donahue. Before I get to the questions, a bit of housekeeping. If I sound a little bit sad during the course of this tag, it's because I just watched the trailer for Sweet Tooth. The adaptation from Netflix of the comic book series Sweet Tooth by Jeff Lemire. It did quite the number on me, and I'm really looking forward to it. So, can't wait to see it in June. Hopefully, I will not put it off as I do most everything else I watch on Netflix. And for my absence the past few days, I'd intended Monday and Tuesday to respond to Paperback Junkie's video asking whether or not science fiction is dead. I've been struggling with how to answer that question, and so I'd sit down, I'd film a video, and it just wouldn't work. So I'm setting it aside and giving it some more time to think about it. And I also wanted to react to the Hugo Award shortlist and a few other issues revolving around my relationship with science fiction. So hopefully I'll be able to work everything out and have that video up at some point, but no guarantees. So anyway, on to the questions. Question number 1. How many books is too many books in a book series? The simple answer, I think, is as many books as are needed to tell the story the author wants to tell. But it's more complicated than that, because in a lot of ways, one book is ideal. Sometimes 2 or 3. It depends. Because oftentimes I think when books, if you divide a book series into sort of the episodics, where each book in a series is essentially a standalone, like Agatha Christie, her Poirot series or her Miss Marple series, or even, say, the James Bond series by Ian Fleming. You could go in at any novel and read it and not need to read the previous novels in the series or the later ones. They are perfectly standalone. And those can go tens, dozens of books in the series and not really lose steam or give way to bloat or anything like that. But then you have those store books that they're telling one story, say A Song of Ice and Fire, or the Stormlight Archive, or The Wheel of Time, where they're telling one story but adding more and more complications to it. And is there not a little bit of bloat to it? I've heard from a lot of reviewers, I've never read much in the way of The Wheel of Time, but the middle books I've heard kind of sort of drag. Certainly parts of Song of Ice and Fire, I think, tend to drag. What I've read so far. I've only read the first 3 books. And of course there's like serialized, say, Legend of the Condor Heroes, which, I actually need to go count and see how many pages it is in English. I'll do that tomorrow with weekly reads. I'll make a note to go and count how many the entire English translation of Condor Heroes is. Although with like Condor Heroes or Lord of the Rings, they're really one big novel that just got broken up into um, easier to publish components or volumes. And I'm not entirely sure how that relates. Like one really big novel versus several individual novels within a larger story. Anyway, but I mean, it depends. In part, and also one thing that needs to be remembered is that um, while particularly in science fiction and fantasy series is incredibly popular, probably in part because readers like to really get to know the characters and the world, but I also think it's familiar. Um, but problem with that is that not all readers will buy each volume as they come out. That they like to wait until the entire series is done, and that could cause some chaos. I know Peter McLean, um, two of his series um, are not going to be finished. The one he did before War for the Rose Throne, I think, was a 4-book series that ended up getting cut to 3, or might have been a 5-book series that got cut to 4. So it kind of ends oddly. And then his current series, War for the Rose Throne, in America, it's only going to be a duology. The third volume isn't going to get picked up, at least for the moment. It's going to get a UK release, thankfully, but it won't get an American release. The Dominion of the Fallen series by Elliot de Bodard. Again, the first 2 volumes came out in America. I'm assuming the third volume wasn't picked up by her American publishers and was published in the UK, and I don't know if it's ever actually gotten an American release. So sometimes more than 1 or 2 books in a series isn't necessarily the best way to go because it might not actually get that far. So it's complicated. Question number 2. How do you feel about cliffhangers? So, again, it depends. If we're talking about like a thriller or a book that relies on thrills as a hook or serialized fiction, cliffhangers are wonderful. They are vital for the progression of the story to keep the reader interested. I think I want to say it's a James Bond that gradually Ian Fleming developed a technique where each chapter ended on a cliffhanger that would continue to pull the reader along to the conclusion. Also, with Legend of the Condor Hero series, there's quite a few cliffhangers. I mean, to keep the story moving, to keep the reader interested. And of course, I mean, that's within the story itself, and again, Legend of the Condor Hero series is serialized, so it makes sense. Now, having a cliffhanger at the end, particularly of like a novel that's a part of a series that really supposed to be like a complete story within itself, I think those can be a bit problematic. Because again, you're never entirely sure whether or not you're going to get that next volume in, for one thing. And for another, it could not work. I mean, of course, there's like The Final Solution by Arthur Conan Doyle, which, I guess the final solution was it the final problem. And From Russia with Love, I think actually those cliffhangers really actually work. Because you're not entirely sure whether or not the main character lived or died. whether Sherlock Holmes or James Bond live or die. And those might actually be quite effective. Now, whether or not, of course, characters should have been brought back, lessen the cliffhangers effect or not, I don't know. But so I would say within a story or as part of like a serialized story, I think cliffhangers are quite effective. Not necessarily as like novels, whether a standalone or a part of a series. I think that is more hit or miss. Question number 3. Hardback or paperback? And in parentheses, ebook. The bulk of my collection is paperback. And I do quite like paperback. I mean, they're more convenient. They're cheaper. Hardbacks are sturdier, and I quite like them as well. I've kind of started adding a lot more hardcovers to my collection in the past few years. My least favorite is ebook. While, yes, they are in many ways convenient, they're also, I've run into numerous problems with them. When I check out ebooks from a library, there's a tendency for the program to boot me, not infrequently, and that's kind of annoying. And I have other issues with checking out books from a library through ebook. And then with Kindle Unlimited, some of the books I've gotten there, primarily comic books, is if I accidentally touch a panel, it'll blow up. And it's a pain to try to get the panel to go back to the page. Question number 4. Favorite book? This one's a tough one. And all of these sorts of favorite book, they're a bit, trouble because, most people don't have just one. And I would say for my favorite books, Perdido Street Station by China Miéville is a definite. Tales of the City by Armistead Maupin, definite. Radiance by Catherine M. Valenti, I quite liked. The Rubber Bride by Margaret Atwood is a favorite. The House Gun by Nadine Gordimer, I want to say is a favorite, but that could also be nostalgic because it has been ages since I've read it. And then There Were None by Agatha Christie. It's a definite. Who else is it? Post Well, Post Square by Christina Spohr is a definite. Big Wonderful Thing by Stephen Harrigan. Really love. So yeah, there's quite a bit of favorite books I have. Question number 5, least favorite book. To continue with the running gag, my least favorite book of all time is Dryland's Inn by Felice Picano. It is basically a space opera in which the universe is ruled by a matriarchy. In a sort of sexist presentation of a matriarchy. And the main character is sent by his handler. He's a bit of a rogue operative to this planet where a scientific expedition has gone missing. And they learn that this planet is in danger. It's flooding and the civilization's about to be destroyed. But they also learn that a lot of the inhabitants, particularly young men, have been going missing. And they eventually find out what's been going on. And it's terrible. But I think a new contender for my least favorite book is probably Blue Angel by Francine Prose. Yeah, really hate that book. Question number 6. Love triangles, yes or no? If Denville, yes, I have no problem with love triangles. Although I would like to see some variation in love triangles. Question number 7. The most recent book you just couldn't finish. That would probably be Alamo House by Sarah Bird. I gave it a Bell Redemption shot. I'd built on it earlier this year, and I tried it again this past week, and spoiler alert, Bell Redemption rejected. Besides that one, I also bailed on Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell and The Counselor by E.J. Beaton. And I talked about them last week on my weekly read, so I don't know if I really should rehash what they're about. I guess maybe I could. So, The Alamo House is about a young woman. She's a graduate student who is increasingly dissatisfied by her boyfriend's lack of cleanliness. She joins an all-women graduate student hostel. It's not so much a sorority as it is like a hostel sort of thing. And eventually they get into some conflict with, I guess, a neighboring fraternity, and hijinks ensue. The Counselor is about a young woman who is appointed essentially prime minister or arbiter of succession, and she must decide who is going to be the next monarch. And as she develops a taste for power, maybe that monarch should be her. All the while she has to figure out who murdered the previous queen and dealing with the local Dark Lady. And then Winter's Orbit is about an irresponsible young prince of a planetary galactic or planetary, like a solar system limited space empire, being forced to marry a representative of one of the newer members of the empire whose husband mysteriously died, and both young men have to figure out what happened to the previous husband. Yeah. So, question number 8. A book you're currently reading. I finished the books I was reading yesterday. That they were The Lions by Peter Campion and Troy Unincorporated by Francesca Abate. I'm about to start on Larvae of the Nearest Stars by Catherine W. Carter. Or is it Carver? No, it's Carter. So I'll start that in a few hours. And since it is a slim volume of poetry, I will probably finish it in one sitting. Question number 9. Last book you recommended to someone. I have recommended, well, I didn't so much recommend it as I loaned it to my mom. And she hated it as much as I did. So, okay. Question number 10. Oldest book you've read. That would be The Epic of Gilgamesh. Question number 11. The newest book you've read by publication date. That would probably be The Counselor by E.J. Beaton, which I bailed on. But I'm still going to count it. If not, it would probably be, I want to say If Then by Joe Lepore. Because I think that came out later last year. And I don't know if I've read anything that really came out this year. Even though I really should get to The Crown and Crisis. So, anyway, I'm completely spoiling weekly reads in this video. Oh well. I'll assume I'll just play weekly reads as if I haven't spoiled anything, even if I've already spoiled everything. Question number 12. Favorite author. Much like with favorite book, there's a lot. Agatha Christie, Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, China Miéville, Catherine M. Valenti, Jill Lepore, yeah, there's quite a few. Question number 13. Buying books or borrowing books? Recently, it's been buying books. I used to go to my local, well, not my local library, but the library in Waco to get most of my books that way. But lately, the past few years, I mean, the pandemic's really sort of kicked it into high gear that I've started to buy more books than I had previously. And so now it's pretty much buying books. The only reason I use like the ebook function for my library is really for the BookTube prize. And a few other books that I'm unsure about. But for the most part, I've been buying books. Question number 14. A book you dislike that everyone else seems to love. Well, I guess for the moment, The Lesser Bohemians by Amor McBride. It's about a young drama student who falls in love with a much older actor and is told in a very sort of poetic, stream of conscious style that hasn't really connected with me. I've tried it 2 times and I bailed pretty quickly. I will probably give it a third go maybe in July. I think if I have time, I will try it again in July. Also, The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I've never really gotten into Sanderson's work. And I definitely think that it's bloated. Question number 15. Bookmarks or dog ears? Bookmarks. I love bookmarks. I have a little collection of book depository bookmarks. I would like to have collections of other kinds of bookmarks. But I much prefer bookmarks. Question number 16. A book you can always reread. I would say probably various books by Agatha Christie I can reread. The Miss Marple novels, I think I've reread most of those at least once. And some of the Poirots I've reread at least twice. Definitely like Death on the Nile. Some favorites of science fiction and fantasy I've reread a few times. Question number 17. Can you read while hearing music? Yes. Basically, like my big reading days are the weekends, Saturday and Sunday. And that's when I try to read most of the day. And while I'm reading, oftentimes my mom will play music. And I'm fully capable of reading while using the music as kind of background noise. So I'm not listening to the music, but I'm hearing it. And I don't have much struggle in the way of hearing stuff while I'm reading. Although maybe I could do better with it. Actually, I kind of like having like background noise on when I'm reading. So, yeah. Question number 18. One POV or multiple POVs? I think I prefer one point of view. Oftentimes, I don't think multiple POVs really come out all that well because there's an artificiality of drawing these multiple characters together at the end and trying to figure out whose point of view gets where. It doesn't quite work. I mean, I can understand like the usage of multiple POVs, but some of them can also oftentimes be rather extraneous characters. I think a lot of A Song of Ice and Fire will eventually be how many of those characters were just disposable. But anyway, question number 19. Do you read a book in one sitting or over multiple days? Typically, it takes me a few days, depending on the length. The last few days, I've been reading a lot of slim volumes of poetry. And those I've been able to read in one sitting or one day. I think Troy Incorporated and The Lions took me like an hour and a half to read each, if not less. I'm pretty sure Larva of the Near Stars is going to take me about as long. But then there are some books that do take me multiple readings or multiple days to read. It took me 3 days to read. If then, it took me about 2 weeks to read Big Wonderful Thing and These Truths. So it depends, but it does typically take me several sittings to finish a book. And finally, question number 20. Who do you tag? I'm not entirely sure what the question bit in parentheses means. But anyway, I might leave that part out when I post the questions down below. So anyway, but who do I tag? I tag you, if you want to do this tag. So, yeah. So I actually really enjoyed this tag. This was fun. So I will see you tomorrow with certainly weekly reads, even though I did spoil most of what I was going to talk about in this video, but I'll explain my reasoning tomorrow, and that might be fun. And it's probably going to be a big rant or two, but anyway. And I might try to have another go at Is Science Fiction Dead? Which will also include the Hugos and my current relationship with fantasy and so we'll see. Excuse me. Definitely at least weekly reads. Hopefully I will also be able to get Is Science Fiction Dead? And of course I need to figure out what I'm going to see about, because there's a second season of Has Steve Read It? Steve being obviously Steve Donahue. And I don't know what books I have that I ought to ask him if he's read. Because I'm pretty sure he's read all of them, so I don't know. But I'll look around and see, and that will probably be a video for next week, because there's already a lot of really good Has Steve Read It videos. Anyway, I will leave you now, because I'm starting to ramble, and I'm almost at 30 minutes. So, thank you, BookTube. Have a great afternoon, and stay safe.